everyone, it's Melissa, and today I am here with another top 10 list of books I read in 2020. I've previously uploaded my top 10 fiction reads of 2020, and today I'm going to share with you my top 10 non-fiction books of 2020. At number 10 is From Here to Eternity by Doughty. Doughty is a mortician, and she has a YouTube channel called Ask a Mortician where she demystifies death, dying, the funeral industry, etc., etc. And this is a book where she travels to a few different parts of the world to explore different customs around like funeral rites, around death and dying, different religious practices, different like cultural practices. And not only was it really interesting, but I think she really handled all of these different customs with a lot of care and respect, especially given the fact that a lot of them can seem very strange through a Western lens. And Doughty really pushes back on some of our Western ideas of death and how we keep it at a distance and don't really accept it. It was just a really interesting read. Number 9 is As You Wish, Inconceivable Tales from the Making of the Princess Bride by Cary, Elwes. If you like The Princess Bride, I think you would really enjoy this memoir. It is just so heartwarming, all his stories of the different actors and the director, and it just seemed like such a wonderful experience to them all, not without its, accidents on set or problems or whatever that is always fraught with in filmmaking, but they just genuinely seem to be like a tight-knit cast, and it was just, really heartwarming to hear those stories. I listened to it on audiobook narrated by Cary, and that's how I would recommend it as well. And there were even a few cameos from different castmates reading their own little anecdotes, so that was a special little treat. Number 8 is Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. This is a collection of essays about feminism, about race, about a lot of different things, and it's hard to give kind of a cohesive overview of this collection, but what I will say is more so about Roxane Gay's like writing style or her voice. She writes in a way that's very accessible, very clear-cut. She makes her points very clearly, but she doesn't talk down to you, but nor does she write in a way that is like overly academic or scholarly, even though she is an academic. I just really like her writing style. She uses a lot of pop culture references, books, movies, music to illustrate her points. So if that sounds like the kind of writing style that you would enjoy, then I would highly recommend this collection. At number 7 is Heavy by Kiese Laymon. This is his memoir, and it tells a story of his life, specifically being Black, being male, and being heavy. And so the intersection of those three things obviously has really impacted how he navigates the world. It follows his life from, I think, maybe like prepubescent. I think it starts when he's maybe 10 or 12 or something like that, and follows him through to college, through to his life as an academic. And his story is just very compelling, illuminating, and just really powerfully written. Number 6 is Disfigured by Leduc. This is a book about how disfigurement and disability is talked about in media, specifically in like fiction. She talks a lot about fairy tales, but also about new media, so like think Disney films and kind of like new fairy tales, and how people with disfigurements or disabilities are portrayed in the stories that we've been told, in the stories that we continue to tell, and how damaging that is for people living with a disfigurement or disability. When we think about fairy tales, who's the villain? The person with the scar, the person with a facial deformity, the ugly stepmother. It was just such an interesting book to see these tropes, to see how lazy they are, really, honestly, but to also see how they are continually perpetuated today. When you think we have moved beyond this, but they are absolutely everywhere. And something the author did that I really enjoyed was she mixed information about like fairy tales and like movies and media with her own experiences being a disabled person growing up, and like how those things affected her personally. So I love the mixture of kind of like more of like an academic, I guess, discussion mixed in with her own personal anecdote. I thought worked really well. And I think as book lovers, as people who like to consume stories, or as movie lovers too, this wasn't just about written fairy tales. This is about all different types of media. I think of lovers of media, it's an important book to read as well. At number 5 is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. This is, I don't even know if you'd call this a collection of essays, a collection of stories, maybe a collection of musings. Robin Wall Kimmerer is an Indigenous woman who is a botanist, so she weaves together stories that are a mixture of Indigenous wisdom or tradition, scientific teachings, and her own personal stories or anecdotes. This book is all about nature, really, about plants, about reciprocity in our relationship with nature, about thinking of nature as gifts to be cherished versus commodities or resources to be exploited. I think this is a collection that is best read slowly rather than consumed all at once. And that's how I chose to read it. I really slowed down while I was reading it, and I enjoyed it more that way. I'm an outdoor educator and a nature lover, so I think this was just tailor-made for me, but it really made me feel just like warm and gooey on the inside. So if you're into that sort of sentimental writing about nature and our relationship to the earth, then I think you would really find this maybe a little bit indulgent, but definitely warm and fuzzy. At number 4, I have Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward. This is her memoir sharing the stories of 5 young men she lost in the span of, I think it was 4 years, including her brother. They all died very, very young, like in their teens, early 20s. And although the causes of their death were all seemingly very different, through the book, she really shows you how all of their deaths can be linked back to growing up poor and Black in the South of the United States. This is very powerful, very intense, a very hard read. You really feel her pain over the friends and family that she lost at such a young age. You really feel for her when she's talking about how people in her community, young people, are just made to feel like their lives don't matter, that their lives are valueless and meaningless. And while that might sound very, very bleak, there is a warmth to her writing. She writes with a lot of nostalgia and warmth, talking about her childhood and her growing up in friendships, even though her childhood was hard and she had an absent father for a lot of it and things that weren't pleasant. But there's this real sense of family and community that really jumps off the page that I think really makes this just something extra special. At number 3, I have Hunger by Roxane Gay. I really tried to keep this top 10 list all different authors, but I just couldn't. I really like Roxane Gay's writing a lot. Hunger is her memoir about her body specifically, about how her body has changed over time, her relationship to her body and food, how she feels about her body. This book is a complete roller coaster. Trigger warnings for sexual abuse. She had something really awful happen to her in her youth, which kind of spurred her, I guess, toxic or bad relationship with food and with her body, and how she has used her weight as a shield. And I've never read a memoir quite like this, where it was through the lens of like your relationship with your own body, like versus a relationship with friends or family or your childhood. Like this was very specifically about how she thinks about her body now. She's very upfront that at the end she's doesn't have some sort of like grand statement, like no illumination, that she still struggles with accepting her body. She still struggles with it all the time. If you're someone who has struggled with your own acceptance of your body, I think you would really relate to a lot of what she's saying. And if you're someone who hasn't had that struggle, if you're someone who has been thin for most of your life, I think this is an important book to read, because it really, she really does a fantastic job of explaining how people in big bodies feel, how they have to navigate the world, how they are made to feel by others, how they feel about their own bodies, how that changes over time. It really gives a lot of perspective about how people in large bodies live with others and with themselves, and it was just brilliant. I loved it. Number 2 is Good Talk by Mira Jacob. This is a graphic memoir, not a straightforward memoir. It's more of a collection of her conversations with different people. So conversations with her family, with her husband, with her friends, with strangers, with her son, and a lot of them relating to race in America and the prejudices that she faces just going about her daily life. Her parents are immigrants from India, and it talks about her conversations with them and them being basically from two different worlds as she grew up in America. It really talks about parenting a brown child in America. She's having these conversations with her young son about things like 9/11 and the racism she faced post 9/11, being a brown person. The memoir felt very intimate, and I think part of that was that it was conversations, and a lot of these were very intimate conversations, just her and one other person, while you feel like you are having a conversation with her. And I think she did an absolutely fabulous job of trying to encompass so many different things about her daily life into one book. And my number 1 nonfiction that I read in 2020 is Invisible Women by Criado Perez. The subtitle to this is Data, Bias in a World Designed for Men. And I think that title says it all. The author goes through a lot of different topics, transit and transportation, technology, like employment, all sorts of different topics, and all through the lens of how things are not designed for women and how that hurts women. So there are some things that are pretty obvious maybe, but there are so many things that weren't obvious to me as a woman. So I think it was just a really important book, bringing to light a lot of problems we have. I think she also really did a really good job of talking about things that affect women globally and not just like middle class white women. And like I said, there were so many things that you just wouldn't even think are problems for women, and it all comes back down to not malicious intent, but just a lack of collecting data. The information we have on medication is based on trials using primarily male subjects. Symptoms that medical professionals are taught are based more so on symptoms that males experience from different diseases and not what female anatomy or physiology might experience by having the same disease. Things like seatbelts and the way cars are manufactured, like car safety measures, are designed with dummies that conform to male anatomy, which means that women are far likelier to have more serious injury or death in car crashes than men. The way that transit systems are designed around the world take into account men's routes of like movement and not women's, and like how that hugely impacts a woman's day. And you might think like, oh, like women and men shouldn't have different like travel needs, but they do. And she really highlights like all these different intricacies, and she really talks about how when we don't collect data where we can disaggregate data by gender, how that gravely affects women's lives and their health around the world. I just thought it was completely mind-blowing, and it shouldn't be. We should be fixing this crap. So it's definitely a little scary, but definitely the most interesting nonfiction I read all year. So those are my top 10 nonfiction books that I read in 2020. Please share your thoughts below if you read any of these books, or if you want to share with me your top nonfiction pick that you read this year. I would love to hear about it. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope everyone's doing really well, and we'll chat soon. Take care. Bye.